We are honored to have with us today one of New York and the country's most influential rabbis and one of the preeminent voices in conservative Judaism, Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove. Rabbi Cosgrove has been the senior rabbi at Park Avenue Synagogue since 2008. He was ordained at the Jewish Theological Seminary in 1999, earned his PhD from the University of Chicago Divinity School. He is the host of Common Faith, a Sirius XM podcast, the author of numerous pieces, essays, op-eds, and I would say most importantly, his 2024 book, For Such a Time as This, on Being Jewish Today. Everyone here will have a copy of the book available at the table outside at the conclusion, so please pick it up. It is an important, personal, insightful exploration of virtually all of the important issues that Jews and Judaism face today, including our issues with Zionism and Israel. Rabbi Cosgrove serves the conservative movement, the Jewish community beyond the congregation, and the community at large. I could list all of his activities, but it would only take away from the precious time that we have with him today. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove.
Good afternoon, AZM. Thank you, Michael, for your generous words of welcome. Herblock, thank you so much for the invitation. To Rabbi Randy Brown, thank you for your ongoing friendship, now decades old, to speak after President Herzog, but before Mark Wilf. I feel like the martyrology service on Yom Kippur. But we're gonna make a run at it right now. So it's great to be here. It's great to be amongst friends, people with common cause. It is a deep honor, and it's also a profound challenge to speak to the conference theme, Zionism, Many Visions, One Dream. And as Herb invited me, and as I was preparing, staring at the title of the conference, of all things, I thought of the power of punctuation and grammar. Zionism, Many Visions, One Dream. The assembled leadership of AZM together in one room to shape the future of a shared Zionist mission. We face no shortage of challenges from the outside. In Israel, around the globe, here in New York, and yet it's the fault lines within the global Jewish family that concern me most. A distancing between Israel and diaspora Jewry, fissures within the American Jewish community, religious, secular, right and left. Does a conference title bear an exclamation mark? Zionism, Many Visions, One Dream. This is our charge, who we are and who we must be. Or is the conference title bearing a question mark? Zionism, Many Visions, One Dream. Has such a thing ever existed? Could it ever exist? Is it aspirational, but alas, unachievable? And so too the title of my remarks, For Such a Time as This. These words take their cue from my recent book that Michael mentioned on American Jewry and its post-October 7th relationship to Israel. Comes from the biblical book of Esther, when in the face of Haman's wicked decree against the Jews, Mordecai calls on his niece Esther, by way of an emissary, to rise to the occasion and stand proud in her identity. Who knows if it was not for such a time as this that you've attained your position? For such a time as this, exclamation point, a command to all of us in the wake of October 7th. We must all, in a moment of crisis, find our inner Esther, rising to the occasion and stand shoulder to shoulder. Today, provocatively, that exclamation point becomes a question mark. For such a time as this, what is the state of American Zionism today? How is it different than it was 2 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and before that? Like any great story, the story of American Zionism has different chapters, every age, every stage, a turning point. How is this time different from a different time? We look back not to wax nostalgic for yesteryear, nor to be too predictive about the future. Today we ask the question, for such a time as this, what is our time, its challenges and opportunities, and the calling of the hour? So let's start, as the song goes, at the very beginning, a very good place to start. As long as Jews have been Jews, from Genesis chapter 12 with God's call to Abraham, our identity has been measured by way of geographical and spiritual proximity to the land. A first principle which, and I can't help myself, New York Mayor-elect elides and ignores when he calls himself an anti-Zionist but not an anti-Semite. From Joseph being sold down to Egypt in this week's Torah reading, to our wilderness wanderings, the first Commonwealth, our laments by the rivers of Babylon, the second Commonwealth, and subsequent exile, be it due to the hands of our oppressors or the theologically minded mipnei chata'enu, our own sins, our eyes and hearts have always turned to Zion. In good times and bad, as Jewish communities flourished in Bavel in Spain or anywhere else by way of halachic literature, poetry, libi b'mizrach, or breaking glasses at weddings, ever reminding us, im eshkachech, if I forget thee, a Jewish existence whose foundation has always been a connection to the land, when we were in the land and when we were not. As the limitations of the Enlightenment and the Emancipation became evident in the second half of the 19th century, what was a distant hope for return took on new urgency with individuals like Pinsker and auto-emancipation in 1882, Herzl and the Jewish State, 1896, Nordau, Jewry of Muscle in 1903. It was time for Jews to become the subject of their own sentence rather than the object of someone else's. As I always remind the rabbinical students I teach, Orthodox, conservative Judaism, Reform are but three of a handful of responses to the challenges of modernity, the question of how a Jew can live in the modern world. The most famous and perhaps most successful response to this question, as Herzl best understood, is Zionism, a vision by which a Jew could be fully Jewish and a full citizen of the world, a nation like any other nation. No matter the passion of Zionism's founding ideologues and the courageous first waves of Aliyah, the vast majority of Jews, as we know, did not heed the Zionist rallying cry, but instead emigrated to American shores, or, as in the case of my grandparents, the United Kingdom. The story of American Jewry is largely, but not entirely, the tale of 2 million Jews, of 20 million immigrants who arrived in America around the turn of the 20th century in search of a better life for themselves and their descendants, seeking to balance a hyphen of American Jewish identity. It was not then, nor now, a straightforward proposition to hold multiple hyphenated identities. I think of Theodore Roosevelt's infamous 1916 address, America for Americans, where he proclaimed, "I stand for straight Americanism, unconditioned and unqualified. I stand against every form of hyphenated Americanism." Roosevelt decried what he dubbed the moral treason of acting or speaking as a German American, Irish American, English American, or any other hyphenated identity. And it was this context, the challenge of hyphenated identities, that was a backdrop for Justice Brandeis's 1915 insistence that Zionism was consistent with American patriotism, a landmark Zionist speech that was delivered, interestingly, to a group of Reform rabbis who feared that supporting the Yishuv, the early settlements in Palestine, would be perceived as somehow incompatible with the aspiration of being accepted as an American. For American Jews, the task was a tricky one, a not yet established American Jewish community fearing the charge of dual loyalty, figuring out what to do with the not yet established Yishuv. No discussion of American Zionism can occur without mention of Henrietta Zold. More than Brandeis, more than Stephen Weiss or Abba Hillel Silver, it's Zold, the founder of Hadassah, to whom all of American Zionism owes a debt beyond repayment. Zold delivered her first lecture on Zionism in 1896 before Herzl's publication of Der Judenstaat. As a daughter of Russian immigrants, Zionism held a central place for Zold and her conception of Judaism, Hebrew language, Hebrew literature, and beyond, a belief that Judaism could only be in full flower when normal human life was built around Jewish principles. Perhaps more importantly, it was the organization that Zold established, Hadassah, from the shattered shards of her broken heart with 6 other women a few blocks from here in the vestry room of New York's Temple Emmanuel, then it was on 43rd Street, that would forever change American Judaism and American Zionism. Because while Brandeis was off telling people that patriotism and Zionism were compatible one with the other, Zold and her Hadassah comrades were showing people how it could be done. In Francine Klagsburn's words in her marvelous biography, unlike male Zionists with their often grandiose political and nation-building objectives, these women could identify with the down-to-earth goals and skills that Hadassah emphasized. The cause of medical care in Palestine, Hadassah's first hospital some 100 years ago, the cultural work, philanthropy, eventually Youth Aliyah, Hadassah provided a vehicle by which American Jews could do the pragmatic work of Zionism without living in Zion itself. As Klagsburn points out, the effects of Hadassah were not solely to elevate the lives of those in the Yishuv. Their work provided an organizing principle, a civil religion that enhanced the lives of American Jews. As Zold wrote privately in her diary, we, American Jews, need Zionism as much as those Jews who need a physical home. Not just women's organizations, but every Jewish organization aimed at the building and uplifting of Jewish life in the Yishuv and subsequently Israel owes a debt of gratitude to Zold. The critical point, and we'll return to this soon enough, is that the work of Hadassah, as much as it was in service to the Jews of then Palestine, was also in the service of American Jewry, a faith, a civic faith, by which American Jews, in doing good work on behalf of Jews in Palestine, could bring spiritual renewal to themselves. American Zionism, you should, my book's already been paid for, buy Klagsburn's book. American Zionism was not by any stretch a given. Reform, Orthodox, and my own denomination, I believe one should only criticize your own denomination in public, conservative Judaism all had non-Zionist devotees. There are books written on this subject, but my favorite story came in 1945 at my alma mater, the Jewish Theological Seminary. I see Rabbi Bolton here. The then Chancellor, Louis Finkelstein, understood JTS, and for that matter, to have a universal mission, in his own words, a civilizing influence on the modern world, which meant that his views on Zionism were lukewarm at best. Despite his love for the Jewish people, Finkelstein could never square the circle of a Jewish nation state. Having come of age during the Great War, Finkelstein bristled against nationalism of all kinds. As the head of the leading Jewish educational institution of America, his bets were on Jewish life in the diaspora, not Palestine. As a human rights advocate, he would only support a Jewish state that conferred equal status on Christians and Muslims, not to mention that Finkelstein's fundraising base was dependent on Arthur Sulzberger and Louis Strauss, 2 anti-Zionist JTS board members. So despite the Zionism of most American Jews and the student body of the seminary itself, Finkelstein stayed firm in his non-Zionism. So adamant was Finkelstein's position that at the 1945 pre-state JTS graduation, the students' request to sing Hatikva during their processional was turned down. And so in an act of defiance, the students arranged with the Caroliner, the bell ringer at Union Theological Seminary across the street, to play Hatikva so it would be heard during the processional. A younger generation of students protesting the older generation for being too soft on Zionism. History, it would seem, has a wicked sense of humor. Oscar Wilde once said something to the effect that there are 2 tragedies in the world. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting it. The establishment of the State of Israel, Havdil, marks an unprecedented opportunity and challenge for American Jewry, as we finally got what we sought over millennia. When Israel's first Prime Minister, Ben-Gurion, established the State of Israel in 1948, it was both a culmination of and break with thousands of years of Jewish history. For those who lived in Israel, of course, but also for those who didn't. Israel was no longer an abstraction. How could diaspora Jews orient themselves to the living, breathing state as they opted not to live there? Prior to statehood, the term Israel referred to the entire people of Israel, wherever they were. Following May 14, 1948, as Ben-Gurion wrote in a famous exchange with Shimon Ravidovich, Israel became a specific geographic political status designation, no longer the name for the global people of Israel. How does a Jew living in Milan, Moscow, Milwaukee support the Jewish state while remaining a proud citizen of their own country? Up until 48, Zionism, loosely defined, stood for supporting efforts to establish the Jewish state in the land of Israel. In 1961, when the famed Rabbi Joachim Prinz proclaimed, "Zionism is dead, long live the Jewish people," to the AJC, he did so because he believed that with the establishment of Israel, Zionism had fulfilled its purpose, and what was needed was a new and dynamic movement to preserve Jewish peoplehood and create an independent and positive link between American Jewry and Israel. The landscape had changed. What is the new definition of Zionism for the person who has chosen to opt out of settling in the land? To what degree may or must a diaspora Jew engage with, support, defend, or critique the actions of the Jewish state, one that, no different from any other state, makes good and bad choices? Is Israel the Jewish state or the state of the Jews, all Jews, wherever they may be? What does all this mean in practice? From Israel's founding, the debate over American Jewry's relationship has taken many guises. In 1950, for instance, Ben-Gurion and Jacob Blaustein, the then president of the AJC, agreed that Ben-Gurion would tone down his calls for diaspora emigration and refrain from intervening in American Jewish life. In exchange, Blaustein, speaking on behalf of American Jewry, stated that while American Jews could offer advice, cooperation, and help, they would not attempt to speak for Israel. The importance of the Ben-Gurion-Blaustein agreement, not much for its durability, but with hindsight in the last 75 years, a benchmark more honored in the breach than in its observance. The 50s would see the building of a Zionist consensus for American Jewry. With the establishment of the State of Israel, any lingering non-Zionism became a moot point. By 52, Finkelstein was awarding an honorary doctorate to Ben-Gurion. The establishment of the Conference of Presidents, registering AIPAC as a lobbying organization, and for American Orthodoxy, the Gushpanka of Soloveitchik's Kol Dodi Dofek in the midst of the Suez Crisis, all signaling the Zionist transformation of American Orthodoxy. In the wake of the Shoah, Israel's founding had profound implications for the self-perception of diaspora Jews. At its most basic level, Israel provided refuge for world Jewry should they need it. Never again would Jews, as was the case in the Shoah, be denied safe harbor from their oppressors. But Israel was more than that. In diaspora hearts and minds, a source of pride, a new and more assertive identity that served as a counterpoint to the vulnerability of the Shoah and the thousands of years of pogrom-filled exile that preceded it. While opting out of living in Israel, diaspora Jews derived vicarious confidence as the first stages of Israel's existence unfolded. Whether we were safer because Israel existed or not was beside the point. We felt safer because we lived in the time of the Jewish state. American Jewry's engagement with Israel became a constituent building block of American Jewish identity, a civil religion to complement our religion. The pulpit of my synagogue, like so many others, adorned with an Israeli flag, the prayer for the state of Israel, central to our liturgy. Curriculum regarding the history of Zionism and modern Israel in congregational schools, day schools, and Jewish camping. In times of comfort and crisis, American Jews raised vast sums of money for Israel. Summers in Israel, gap semesters, gap years became normative expressions of Jewish life. Politically, American Jews were expected to support elected representatives who prioritize the defense of Israel, important unto itself, but also a rallying cry to unify American Jews in all of its political and religious diversity. As the slogan goes, wherever we stand with Israel. Two of the most impactful achievements of American Jewry in the past century are AIPAC and Birthright Israel, offering free 10-day trips to Israel. Both efforts centered on Israel engagement. So in ways Henrietta Zold could have never imagined, Israel came to serve as a bonding agent to keep American Jewry together. It focused our energies. We were proud of our Israeli cousins and wanted to help them, and the fact that we could provide Israel with philanthropic and political support served their needs and ours. Missions, education, advocacy. It became a secular religion for American Jews, sometimes supplanting Judaism itself. It's easier, after all, to write a check than it is to keep our children home on Friday night to light Shabbos candles. It's easier to call someone a self-hating Jew than to worry about your own children or grandchildren's non-observance. Uninspired by the prayer book, unfamiliar with the Talmud, American Jews became adept at a new kind of Jewish conversation: how our elected leaders vote on legislation regarding Israel's security, or the terms by which we should or shouldn't enter a deal with Iran. The dividing lines between us no longer fell along the various levels at which we observe Shabbat or our beliefs as to whether the Torah is or isn't of divine origin. Our views on Israel took center stage. The decisions being made in a sovereign Jewish state in which we do not live, vote, pay taxes, or serve in the military, a new Israel-based religion. And in many respects, engagement with Israel became more than a religion. It became an orthodoxy. Again, it makes perfect sense that the imperfect policies of Israel or any nation might be worthy of objection by Israelis, Israel's Jewish supporters, or anyone, but sense has very little to do with it. For an American Jew to suggest that this or that policy of the Israeli government was not in the long-term best interest of Israel came to be understood by the American Jewish establishment as a form of betrayal. As the late Rabbi Arthur Hertzberg once observed, quote, "The lack of support for Israel is the only offense for which Jews can be excommunicated." Israel, the thinking goes, does not lack for external enemies. Because we've opted out of the opportunity to live there, American Jewry must forego our right to critique Israel, because any such criticism will become fodder for Israel's real enemies. And to make matters even more complicated for American Jews, while our Jewish identity obligates us to engage with Israel, and for most of us, it's a religious identity that's not recognized by Israel itself, where all matters of personal status, marriage, conversion, burial, fall under the authority of the chief rabbinate. The irony, of course, being that so much of my energy as a conservative American rabbi is devoted to supporting and defending a Jewish state which neither supports, defends, nor recognizes Judaism as I teach it and preach it, a state of affairs whose effect is to make American Jews that the Israel that they love so much does not love them back or even care that they exist. I recall the shock and dismay my daughter shared upon returning from her Israel gap year, discovering that her Israeli pre-army Mechina peers, in whose condition so much of her Jewish identity had been directed, expended zero psychic energy on her well-being and that of diaspora Jewry. And then we have the nerve to send that kid to a college campus expecting her to defend the policies of a government that does not reflect her values nor recognize her Judaism as Judaism. I may be, if I do this right, I'll make everyone angry. I may be constitutionally incapable of walking away from Israel, but others have and will continue to do so before October 7th and all the more since. There's a limit to the self-flagellating exercise of supporting a state that neither recognizes you nor represents your values. For the coming generation of American Jews, the loyalties of yesteryear no longer suffice. And of all the points of difference between the civil religion of American Jewry and the reality of Israel, none loom larger than the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. For post-Shoah generations of American Jews, Israel's claim to the land and need for a sovereign state were obvious, a simple matter of survival. In the first decades of Israel's existence, persistent Arab hostilities sidelined any concerns American Jewry might have harbored on the democratic rights of the Palestinian population. The facts didn't help. Arabs had long rejected any Jewish claim to the land, and mainstream American Jewry paid little attention to Palestinian aspirations to nationhood, instead appropriately focusing on the needs of the Jewish people. Expressions of concern for Palestinians and the conditions they lived were beyond the bounds of Jewish communal discussion. But the past 50-plus years of Israeli settlement expansion have radically changed the facts on the ground and American Jewry's perception of Israel as a Jewish and democratic nation. Whether American Jews know about or care to understand the events leading to the Six-Day War, through which Israel gained control of the territories known as the West Bank, doesn't matter. What matters is that Israel continues to occupy the territories. Whatever justifications, theological, historical, security-related, or otherwise, have been and continue to be marshaled in support of Israel's ongoing presence there, in the eyes of American Jews, the West Bank settlements and illiberal policies they represent pose a threat to Israel's founding promise, democracy. For a progressive American Jew, if the project of Israel is to provide a homeland and security to a historically vulnerable Jewish minority, then how can the state not respond to the needs of the vulnerable minority in its midst? Leaving aside the role of historical revisionism and progressive identity politics, the unresolved status of the Palestinians, lacking as they are in freedom of movement and access, self-determination, and other accoutrements of sovereignty, forms a wedge issue between an increasingly liberal-leaning American Jewry and an increasingly right-leaning Israeli Jewry. The mainstreaming of Jewish fundamentalism in Israeli society and government further compounds the problems. The fact that the same government that fails to recognize American Jews also fails to recognize the Palestinian right to self-determination only serves to increase American Jews' sense of estrangement. And now into the mix, October 7th and the war. Over 1,200 killed, brutally and viciously, 251 taken hostage. We still await Ron Givley's repatriation and proper burial. A trauma beyond words, a trauma that continues to this day. Israel surrounded by Iran's self-proclaimed ring of fire, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, and beyond. The threats, real and existential, well beyond a debate about this border or that border or who's to blame for the latest cycle of hostilities. Ours is a time of real threat for the 47% of world Jews who live in Israel, and with the porous and pernicious blurring of line between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism for us American Jews. Threatening and traumatic as October 7th was and remains, 2 years later, I would reflect that it's a trauma that's been experienced differently by different American Jews. Full-throated as my defense is of Israel, unflinching as my advocacy is on its behalf, I know for reasons I just named that not every Jew holds as I do. For a young person today, Israel is a Goliath to the Palestinian David. Israel's decades-long expansionist settlement policy is perceived to have precluded the emergence of a Palestinian state, and the only prime minister that anyone really knows is either or beholden to extremist parties whose views are antithetical to pretty much every value that liberal American Jews have championed these past decades. One's perception is one's reality, and you can't blame a person for when they were born. Painful as October 7th was for Israel, real as a marginalization felt by way of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, for many American Jews, October 7th was a marginalization twice over. First, the horrific attacks of October 7th and the hatred subsequent to it. And second, a marginalization from the organized Jewish community itself, in whose presence a muzzling, implicit and explicit, occurred. an entire generation disenfranchised from the prior one. You may not like the fact that 30% of New York Jews voted for Mamdani, but you shouldn't be surprised by it. For a liberal Zionist disillusioned by the Israeli government, Mamdani's anti-Zionism is a difference of degree, not of kind. He understood the fissures of our community better than we ourselves did. And the question we face now is, what are we going to do about it? A good starting place would be for the American Zionist community to engage in cheshbon hanefesh, a self-audit as to how, by making unconditional support for the Israeli government a litmus test for Jewish identity, we ourselves have not inflicted harm on the Jewish future. Lest we forget, in 2023, prior to October 7th, the pro-democracy movement against judicial reform brought millions of Israelis to the streets to protest the Israeli government out of love of country. For the first time in my memory, Israelis called on American Jews to engage in the process of advocating that Israel remains a state, both Jewish and democratic. No different than my criticisms of this or that U.S. administration come from a place of my patriotism, so too my critique of Israel. The argument that it's somehow treasonous to criticize this or that Israeli policy simply doesn't hold, as long as that criticism comes from a place of love, loyalty, and investment in the well-being of the State of Israel. And the cheshbon hanefesh goes both ways. It happens on both sides. For such a time as this, when Israel is surrounded by enemies, Jewish critics of Israel need to be judicious in how they voice their dissent. It's one thing to attend a pro-democracy rally in a sea of Israeli flags that begin and ends with the singing of Hatikvah. It's another thing to stand in an encampment next to someone calling for global intifada. October 7th did many things to us as American Jews, one of which being it exposed a fault line we've long avoided. I would readily turn back the clock, and I'm sure you would too, and forgo any wisdom wrought from these past 2 years. But if one outcome is that we can be more intentional about how we voice support and dissent, how we speak to each other, and how we seek to mend the rifts of our people, that is something I would readily welcome. For such a time as this, a new chapter of American Zionism, infused with a sense of our internal pluralism, whereby we avoid the reductive and destructive tactic of labeling people with whom we disagree, either as self-hating Jews or colonialist oppressors. A big tent American Zionism, welcoming people with white hair, salt and pepper hair, and dark hair, wide enough to house a diversity of views, as does Israel, on how best to secure a Jewish and democratic state of Israel. An American Zionism that recognizes that my Upper East Side is not the Middle East, and therefore must be infused with a sense of humility, and no statement to channel Fackenheim should be made about Israel's war of defense that would not be credible in the presence of an IDF soldier who has risked life and limb fighting a merciless enemy, defending his own life and that of his fellow soldiers, all in the pursuit of liberating his captive kin. An American Zionism that's capacious enough to hold multiple views at once, the just cause of securing Israel's defense and standing, and an empathy-filled response to the horrific sufferings of Gaza, the knowledge that if every hostage life is of infinite worth, so too every Palestinian child, the understanding that while we champion the IDF, that support doesn't come with a moral blank check, and that support need not extend to every policy of the Israeli government before, during, or since October 7th. Against those who stand outside our tent, we need to hold the line. For those who seek to dwell in our tent, we must expand it. We need to do both. In short, we need to learn to walk and chew gum at the same time. For such a time as this, a new chapter of American Zionism that boldly asserts support for Israel as a constituent block of contemporary Jewish identity, but does not see Zionism as synonymous with Jewish identity. For far too many Jews, support for Israel became a vicarious faith, a civil religion masking the inadequacies of our actual religion. The only way Israel will learn from, listen to, or care about American Jews is if we show ourselves to be living energetic Jewish lives. In 1915, Brandeis said, to be a good American, we need to be better Jews. In 2025, to be good Zionists, we need to be better Jews. A robust American Jewish identity can weather policy differences with this or that Israeli government. A paper-thin identity cannot. For such a time as this, an American Zionism that refuses to let the ideological, institutional, and philanthropic extremes define the field of play in terms of debate. We who live between the 40-yard lines, who are capable of holding multiple views at once, who stand by our convictions and know that we need to expand our tent, have a unique role to play in American Zionism today. We can defend Israel, support religious pluralism, and encourage efforts to achieve Arab-Jewish coexistence and dialogue. Because the stakes are so high, the sane center must speak with passion and with volume. We must be the change we seek in this world. We must protect each other from the ideologues on the extremes, rallying men, women, money, and discipline for a cause that is just. I began with a question of grammar and punctuation, and it's there that I leave you. If Zionism has a catchphrase or watchword, it is Herzl's immortal line from the introduction of Alt Neuland, "If you will it, it is no dream." The English translation, however, misses a point, what Herzl first wrote in German and what Sokolow translated into Hebrew. Im tirtzu, if you, plural, all of you, will it, ein zo agada, then it's no dream. The future dream of American Zionism depends not on my vision or yours, not on the right or the left, religious or the secular. It's a dream that depends on all of us, together. An American Zionism for such a time as this, bold enough to embrace the voices, complexities, paradoxes, and even contradictions of our age. A Zionism of love and engagement with Israel, our tradition, and perhaps most of all, with one another as we carry the dream forward together. Thank you.
Do 2 questions.
Whatever you want. I'm here for you.
Let's do a picture. Yasher Koach, Rabbi Cosgrove. Rabbi Cosgrove has been gracious enough to allow us to field 2 questions this afternoon before our next speaker. So we have microphones.
Should I?
And Mark Jacob. So we'll have those 2 questions.
Solid.
Great.
Thank you so much again, Rabbi Cosgrove, for being here. And I'll ask, I think also as a JTS ordained colleague, a question actually of grammar.
name?
Margot Hughes Robinson.
Hey, Margot.
I'm here with Partners for Progressive Israel. And I'm curious what you think about sort of presenting over and over this hyphen in Jewish American, Zionist American, American Jew, as sort of a fault line, and the ways in which we may actually be reinforcing these binaries by presenting them. I think whether or not we're talking about even the notion of an American hyphenated identity, right, in a very Ashkenazi story actually of what it means to be an American Jew, as somebody whose family lived in both the US and France and then spent some of my early adulthood in Israel. I really lean on Edgar Morin's, the Sephardi Jewish thinker and complex thought, right, originator of sort of multi-rootedness, right, that it's actually a quite natural expression of the Jewish condition to be both at home and uncomfortable in Israel, in France, at my family Shabbat table, or in Jerusalem, in 3 different places that I've lived in 3 different languages. And I'm curious also about this, right, hyphen as reinforcing this binary that there's only 2 ways also to engage in thoughtful, integrated, human rights-based and Zionist critique of what's been going on and what continues to happen in Israel, right? That there's only.
Okay, so there's a lot in your question.
Yes.
It's not a question.
I'm sorry. This is a large framing, but I'm asking, right, what if we present over and over that the binary is protests that begin and end with Hatikva and are surrounded by flags, or encampment, that in this city and in this country and in Israel, there's been a robust protest movement that lives in the in-between and that is articulating a connection both to Israelis and to Israel and to human rights that we keep organizing as if it doesn't exist. I'm curious, like, where is the space in between, and how do we better fund and uplift the robust in between?
I'll start with the second part, which I addressed somewhat in my comments, and then the first part I think needs further exploration, because I'm not familiar with the theorists that you spoke of. But I'm suggesting that we reject the binary, okay? Meaning, I think prior to October 7th, 2023, and otherwise, when American Jews saw Israelis on the streets protesting the proposed judicial reform, there was sort of a sacred cow that was there. It was a paradigm shift. And not only that, but some of those who have made a living in Israel saying, stay out of our BI budding business, were now saying, you got to get involved if you're interested in Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. And we ourselves saw those protests, and so it became it was no longer plausible to say you couldn't be a lover of Israel and your heart in Kaplan Street. Okay, so people in the room might feel differently, but we are all participants in the project of supporting and defending Israel, no matter where we were in that moment. And I would propose that that same idea that is operative today. And I think, I use the hyphen as a way to speak about the balancing acts that we all somehow participate in, right? Given the fact that those present in this room define themselves as proud Americans and proud Zionists, that we believe ourselves to be empathetic, universally minded human beings, but also parochial, proud defenders of the Jewish cause. The fact, right, all of these balancing acts that we do, and we haven't secluded ourselves either in Haredi communities, nor have we, for that matter, assimilated into the melting pot of American life. I think the project of balancing hyphenated identities, me, not surprisingly as a conservative rabbi, is a project of American Jewish identity. There might be better words for it, but I think you're going to have to give me a reading list.
And our final question, and I should have emphasized, I'm sure Mark Jacob will ask a question, so we're going to questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much. First of all, it's been an excellent conference. I want to thank everybody who put it together, especially Herb Block and the committee. It's been really tremendous. My name is Mark Jacob, Coordinating Council of the Jewish Homeland, also known as Eretz HaKodesh. We are a Haredi slate here in the AZM and at the World Zionist Congress. I myself am a board member of the AZM until today, was a leadership cabinet member of the AZM, and a delegate to the World Zionist Congress. It was a very good conference, and I want to say until now. We are having a very difficult time over here, and I have a question that I'd like to ask. We have soldiers in the audience here, IDF soldiers, lone soldiers here. Very difficult for them to hear from our keynote speaker, who is a very strong supporter of Israel, and we all believe that, to hear that speaker question whether those who on their own accord, or whether by way of upbringing, or whether by way of other ostracism from Israel, have decided that they choose to make camp with those who, at this point in time, after October 7th, have shown themselves to be enemies of the Jewish state and sometimes enemies of the Jewish people. And it's very difficult for us to hear that. It's very difficult for us to swallow it, especially as we ourselves are breaking out of a mold. We are Haredim, who are here at the AZM, who are part of the WZO. We are obviously not living interior lives. We're here with you all. I own a law firm. We are accomplished people. And I would like to know, how can we go back to our people telling them that you should be a part of this movement, that this is something that's for you also, when just now we feel so ostracized by the speaker in terms of wanting to open the door to those who are sitting in camps that are against the Jewish state, and seemingly also at the same time interested in somehow closing the door to us. And I think it's a very sincere question and something that we at our table are feeling right now.
Okay. Well, thank you for the sincerity and the manner by which you speak. So let me just be very clear, and I'm happy to share with you the transcript if I stayed faithful to it. I was not speaking about those outside of the camp who seek the ill will and destruction of the Jewish people. I was speaking about the ability of those within the tent to find an opportunity, a platform to support Israel in a way that need not be aligned with every policy of every this or that Israeli government. I believe that's what I said, and I'm going to stick to that. But to your specific question, I'll just give you this proposition or challenge as you yourself are finding your place in this wider tent that is new territory, as you yourself say. My watchword as a Jew is Ahavat Yisrael, love of Israel, and love of the people Israel and love of the state of Israel. And for me, that means that you got to love people even if you don't like them. And so that means that when I look over to Israel and I see Israelis who are leading or working or doing things in ways that don't reflect my personal values, then those people are my people. They are my mishpacha. And no different than family members. Thanksgiving's just a few days away, who I love but don't necessarily like. I have to figure out a way to sit at the same table with them, notwithstanding our differences, which also means, and here is sort of where the second part of my remarks came in, there are Jews within the camp of the committed Jewish people who are actively seeking a place at the table. They don't reflect my views. There's something sort of Lincoln-esque about this moment in the sense that I'm trying to stand firm in my convictions, but also embrace those views to the left of me who don't represent my views. They too should be extended the same Ahavat Yisrael as those people to my right. Is that hard? That is extraordinarily hard, but that is what we need to do at a time like this.